Good morning. We are at the last lines of Kuf Chav Dalet Amid Aleph 124a, and the Gemara is asking whose opinion is it that says that we compare Yantiv to Shabbos and say that something is prohibited on Yantiv as a muktzah because maybe you're going to make a mistake and do it on Shabbos as well. And we have another brayso that says that we're not comparing Yantiv to Shabbos. So who are these two opinions? Amar of Papa, so Rav Papa said, one is the opinion of Beis Shammai, and one is the opinion of Beis Hillel. That's not we learn Beis Shammai and Beis Shammai say, that even though on Yantif you're allowed to carry items that outside, but it would have to be something that you need. Carrying something outside of private domain. Even without an eruv, carrying would have to be something that has some sort of purpose for yontiv, and not just carrying a child or a lulav or a sefer Torah. Beis Hillel Matir and Beis Hillel say no, you're allowed to carry something that does not have a direct food need, and as long as there's some sort of need, you can carry it on yontiv. So you see that Beis Hillel permitted on Yantiv to do things that would not be permissible on Shabbos. So they were more lenient on Yantiv, and they didn't say, look, if you're going to do it on Yantiv, you may end up doing it on Shabbos. So that's the same here. These two brises, one that says that we're concerned that you're not allowed to do something on Yantiv that you may confuse and do it on Shabbos, such as not moving the wood. As a firewood, and they still say that you're allowed to. Amid the Shamas, so Gemara says, wait. Amid the Shamas lu Beishamai Hitzah. Tiltul Mishamas. Man, well, maybe Beishamai only said that in regards to carrying, but in regards to muktzah items, some within your own house, not moving a particular item that you would have set aside before Yantiv. So the Gemara says, wait, but tiltu gufei la'amashamitzai? Isn't the prohibition of muktzah on account of carrying it? So here, the Gemara gives us an insight into some of the basis of muktzah, where it says that one of the reasons, at least, for muktzah is going to be that don't move this item, let's say the hammer, don't move it on Shabbos or Yantif, because if you do, you may carry it, you may come to carry it. As you remember yesterday, we mentioned that it all started in the days of Nehemiah, and it started on account of that people were not keeping Shabbos at all. Meaning, it was not only specifically on account of carrying. Carrying is one of the many issues that would have been going on. Carrying outside of public domain, plowing, threshing. Pressing grapes. These are things that were going on, and on account of that, there was muktzah. So muktzah is really the general idea of detaching from daily chores in order to connect to the pleasure of Shabbos and the resting of Shabbos. And carrying is one of them, but it is a concern that you may end up carrying. And Rav also follows the opinion of Rava that anything that you need, l'tzorach mekoma, is like tzorach gufa. Anything that you need for its place is the same as you need for its use. That means if your hammer is on your chair, even though that a hammer generally is a muktzah item on account of that it generally is used for construction, for a Shabbos prohibited use. Nevertheless, if you need it, you can move it. Whether you need it for itself to open a nut, or whether you need it for its place, but you need it moved, and therefore you're allowed to move it. So where do we see that Rav also follows this opinion? Rav said, that moving a shovel so that it doesn't get stolen because it was left outside, that is shalol l'tzerach. That's considered not a necessary move. Meaning, but if you need a place, as much as, or as if you need if you need the place or if you need the item, then you're allowed to move it. I'm sorry, John, I didn't get your question.
If you have to move something, do you have to do it in a non-typical way? Like if you have to move a hammer, is it okay to just pick it up like you regularly would, or do you have to, tip it off the chair, or what?
No. So a hammer and that kind of muksa you're allowed to pick up and just put it where it needs to be. There are some muksas that you just tilt off of what it is and let it drop. Yeah, so time So the reason that you're not allowed to move that is because it's just to be stolen. Meaning you're afraid of it being stolen, but you don't need a place, you don't need the item, you simply want to get it away. It's like taking it out of the sun so it doesn't get damaged. But for its place or its use, you're allowed to move it. Eini, it's not so. But Rav Kahana went to visit Rav. V'amar aisili shusa lekahana leisavale. Bring a basket, a bucket for Kahana to sit on. So you see that he had to explain. You should bring this basket, which is a muksa item. Bring it on account of that. It was needed for Rav Kahana to sit on. But if not for that, you wouldn't be allowed to move it. So wouldn't this indicate that the only reason he was allowed to move it was because he needed to sit on it? So it was based on his need, but without that you couldn't move it because he was actually going to use it in a permissible way. This is what he said to them. Shekulu shusa. You can or take it away from it where it was so that Kahana has a place to sit. So this basket trap was in the way, and he said move it so that he can sit. Or perhaps that he said to move it, and really it was in the sun, and he wanted to indicate that you can't just move it from the sun to the shade if not for the fact that somebody wants to use it. Rav Mari Barachel, Havalehu Beisid Yusuf B'Shimsha. Mari Barachel had these mats or these felt cushions that were out in the sun. Also, came to Rav, Amalei Malto Talinu. Am I allowed to move it? Amalei Shari. He says, yeah, you can move it. Because it's not a muksa item. It's not used for a prohibited use. It's a cushion, so it can be used on Shabbos, and you can move that a vessel, an item that is used for a Shabbos permissible use. That Rava holds you can move even just to save it from damage from the sun, even just for no reason, as Rashi said. So he said you're allowed to move it. So he says, yeah, but I don't really need it. Isli achrina. I have other cushions. So he says, so what? Chazal la'orchin. You can use it for guests. Isli nami la'orchin. I have enough for others. He said, Amalei. He said, I can hear from you. Galisa adaitacha de kiravas milacha. I hear that you follow the opinion of Rabbah that even a permissible use item, such as a cushion, which the use is not prohibited on Shabbos. Nevertheless, you hold like Rabbah that you're not allowed to move it just from the sun into the shade. It has to be moved for a need. Either you need it or you need its place. Well, then lekuli al mashari. So for everybody else, it's permissible because they follow the halacha that it's a klisha malachta leheter, a vessel that is primary use is permissible on Shabbos. You can move even without any need. But for you, it's prohibited because you follow that opinion. Amar Barashi, Amarab Michbadishel Milza, a Swiffer like broom made of cloth that's to wipe down the table. Mutter l'taltal b'Shabbos. They are allowed to move on Shabbos. Aval shel tamra, but a broom made of twigs and branches and leaves. So this is a palm frond. So it's made out of palm. So that's you're not allowed to move because it's actually prohibited. Their floors were made out of the ground. And if you sweep on it, you're actually smoothing out some of the holes and cracks in the ground. And we know that's prohibited. So a broom in that type of environment is a vessel that its primary use is actually prohibited on Shabbos. Now you can move even the broom, a regular palm broom. If you need its place or you need it itself for something else, and you're going to use it for something, so why would Rav say it's prohibited? You're allowed to move even an item that's primarily used for a prohibited usage on Shabbos. Nevertheless, you're allowed to move it for its need, whether you need itself or you need the vessel. You need a place. Rav Karavasvirle, as we just said, he follows the opinion of Rava. Ela mechamal etzel. Must be that it was in the sun and you want to move it to the shade. Mutter. But Rabbi Elazar would say about that it's permissible. Why would it be permissible? So the Gemara says, no, indeed, we're talking about that he brought him from the sun to the shade. And indeed, Rabbi Elazar does not permit it, as the text should read, V'chein amar Rabbi Elazar, so too Rabbi Elazar say, you're not allowed to move it. So we have over here these three rules. Rule number one is that any vessel that is its primary use is the tzorach gufa mekama. Is a klisha malachta leheter. It's a primary use is permissible on Shabbos, such as the felt cushions that we saw before, or a tabletop cloth broom. Those are uses that you're allowed to do on Shabbos, and therefore you're allowed to move these vessels or these items not only for a need, whether the need is for its place or for the item itself, but even for no need. You can just move it on Shabbos. It's not muksa. If it is, however, the primary use is a muksa. The primary use is a prohibited use on Shabbos, such as a hammer, such as this palm broom, which are prohibited on Shabbos. Our brooms obviously are not prohibited on Shabbos. We don't live on the ground. We live on tiled or finished floors, and so we can sweep on Shabbos. But in those days, that was prohibited, and so there was a prohibited item because the primary usage was prohibited on Shabbos. So if you need its place, or you need the item itself for a permissible use, then you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. But that item, if you want to move it just to save the item, to something that's beneficial for the item, and it isn't in and of itself necessary, it's not a need that you have now for Shabbos, then it's going to be prohibited. Any vessels that you can carry on Shabbos, that you're allowed to move on Shabbos, even the broken pieces of that vessel may be moved. Because at the onset of Shabbos, essentially this was a usable item. That's the point we're at this point. But it has to be that you can use it in a manner that is similar to what it was originally meant to be, what it originally functioned. Now, as long as it has a functional use. That's what this opinion says. It doesn't have to be similar to the original function. It just has to have some sort of function. So therefore, shivrei areva lachzes b'mpi achavius. If you have a shard from a bucket, so it can be used to cover a barrel. Shivrei zchuches, glass pieces, shards. Lachzes b'henes pi apach. You can cover the opening of a hole in a vessel. Rabbi Yehuda, however, Rabbi Yehuda says it's not enough that you have some sort of use for it. It has to be a use similar to the original use. Rabbi Yehuda in malachtan. It has to be similar to its original use, and therefore shivrei areva lotzik l'teichen makbel. It has to be this the shard of a bucket would have to be that you can still use it to put some a soup in it and eat out of it. So it has some receptacle in it. And a shard of glass, it has enough receptacle that you can put some oil in it. The machlokes must be talking about that it broke prior to Shabbos. The Marasava me'en melachta, and one says that it has to have retained its original work, original usage. In me'en melachta cheres loy, but if not, if it was something else, if before Shabbos it broke and its use is only as something else, then it doesn't work. Avo Marasava afil me'en melach cheres. And the other says, no, that since it broke before Shabbos, even if it has another usage, it's going to count as a vessel. That means prior to Shabbos, you have intent or you have the ability to use it as another vessel. So at the onset of Shabbos, it already was a cap to a jug. But if it breaks on Shabbos, everybody says it's permissible. Why? Since at the onset of Shabbos it was permissible, meaning at the onset of Shabbos it was a part of a jug, it was a part of a bowl, and since at the onset of Shabbos it was a part of the bowl was still not broken, so it was a part of a bowl. The onset of Shabbos it was a permissible item to you, so even though now it broke, it's going to remain permissible. So essentially, what Shmuel is saying here is that if at the onset of Shabbos it was still whole, and therefore, as on the basis of that, it was a usable, it was permissible to move because you had a permissible use. When it breaks, even though it doesn't have a original use now, it can only be used for something else, but it still has some sort of use. Rav Yehuda will agree that is movable on Shabbos. The only reason that it's not movable is because it broke before Shabbos and it didn't retain its original use, and therefore it's not worthy of moving on Shabbos. Most of Rav Zutra actually questioned and said it should be the other way around. We see that the Brisa says Masikin Mekalim and Masikin Meshivrei Kalim. On Yantiv you're allowed to make a fire. What are you allowed to use as kindling and as firewood? Are you allowed to use your wooden spoon? Are you allowed to use other wooden vessels that you have in the house as fire fuel? So he says you're allowed to use vessels. So a wooden spoon or some other wooden vessels, you're allowed to use them because they were proper. They're proper vessels and they're movable on Shabbos. But not broken vessels. So he says, let's analyze this. The Nishbara Emas. When did this vessel break that we say that you're not allowed to move it because it's a broken vessel, so you can't use it as kindling? Ilema, the Nishbara Be'er of Yantiv, did it break prior to Yantiv? So you had a wooden spoon, and before Yantiv, it broke. So then it's just firewood. At that point, there's nothing else to do with it. So for sure you can use it. Eitzim Ba'almaninu. At that, if it broke before, if we're talking about it broke before Yantiv, it's just a piece of wood. Elalav b'yantiv. So must be what we're talking about is that it broke on Yantiv itself. And yet it says that you're allowed to use vessels, but not the broken vessels. That means it broke on Yantiv, even though at the onset of Yantiv, it was a good wooden spoon, meaning it was a permissible use item, and therefore I'm allowed to move it. Once it breaks, it becomes kindling, but it became kindling on Yantiv, and I can't use it. So rather, if Shmuel said this statement, this is the way he said it. The machlokes is only for broke on Shabbos. The Marsav are Muchanu, that the first opinion says, look, at the onset of Shabbos, it was a permissible item because it was still whole, and now that it broke, I have some sort of use for it, so that's enough to maintain its permissibility. Omar Savar, however, Rabbi Yehuda says no. Now it became a new item. No ladu. This became a new thing. You can't use it in its original form. You can only use it as something else. Well, that's no lad, and there's a muktzah besides for the regular muktzah that we're talking about, there's a muktzah of nolad, a muktzah of something that transformed on Yantiv into a new form. Ava Me'erev Shabbos, Divrei Hakol Mutar. But if it broke before Shabbos, then everybody agrees it's permissible, because at the onset of Shabbos, you already were considering it, instead of a bowl, a cover to a barrel. Because at the onset of Shabbos, you already were intending to use it in its new usage, in its new form. We have one brisa that said, as we quoted before, you're allowed to use wooden vessels for kindling, but you can't use broken wooden vessels for kindling. And as we explained, that it broke on Shabbos, on Yontif. And we have another brisa that says, no, you can, just as you can use vessels to break as fire fuel on Shabbos, you can use broken vessels as fuel for your fire on Shabbos. On Yontif. Yontif. You can't make a fire on Shabbos. Fire on Yontif. And we have another brisa that says that you cannot use vessels, and for sure not broken vessels, as fuel for your fire on Yontif. So what's the distinction? What are the three opinions? So one is Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Nechem. One is Rabbi Yehuda, who says that there is a muktzah of nolad. Therefore, the broken vessels that broke on Yontif are not allowed to be moved, because there is a muktzah of nolad. But the vessel itself, since it's not muktzah, you're allowed to use it as your kindling. Rabbi Shimon says, actually, there's no muktzah of nolad. Something that became a new thing on Yontif is not muktzah, and therefore, since there's no muktzah of nolad, you're allowed to use even the broken vessels. And Rabbi Nechemiah says, no, you can't use the broken vessels, or even the vessels that are not broken, you can't use. Because Rabbi Nechemiah is of the opinion you can only move something on Shabbos and Yontif for its main intended use. And therefore, obviously, if you have a wooden spoon, that its main intended use is not as kindling. Its main intended use is as a vessel in the kitchen, as a spoon. And therefore, it's prohibited to be used. He holds that you can't even use a whole intact vessel as firewood. Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman said, "Hani livni de ishtir mibinyana." If you have bricks that are left over from a construction site, shari l'tiltalinu, you're allowed to move those bricks. The chazil lemizgay, because it's no longer it's no longer needed for the construction. So therefore, you're going to use it for other things. You're going to sit on it. The cinder blocks that are left over from construction become doorstops and usable independent of construction. And so it's no longer a vessel intended for a Shabbos prohibited use. It's no longer a part of construction which is prohibited on Shabbos. It now became a useful non-construction item. Sharginu. However, if you pile them up in the way that they're indicating that you intend to still use it for construction, vada yaktsinu, then you for sure have set it aside from your mind. It's no longer movable on Shabbos because you have maktzeh midaita, you have set it aside from usage. Amar Nachman Amar Shmuel, cheretz katana mutal talta b'chotzer, aval b'karmelis loy. A small earthenware vessel. You're not allowed to. You're allowed to move it in your courtyard itself, because this piece of clay, this clay vessel is usable. You can use it as a cover to a barrel, and therefore you can move it in the courtyard. But you can't move it in a carmelis. You can't move it even within the 4 amos. So generally, the rule is in the rabbinic public domain, which is carmelis, you're allowed to move things up to 4 amos. But you can't move it within that space. But you can't move it beyond that. this item, since it has no use out in the Carmelis, because in your courtyard you may have barrels, so it makes sense that you have a use for this as a cover to your barrel. But out in a Carmelis, there are no barrels out there, so what are you going to do with this piece of clay? There's nothing to do with it anyhow, and therefore over there it's muktzah, and you can't even carry it in the 4 amas. Even in a Carmelis you can use it. But in a public domain, there's no use for it at all. The reason is because in a public domain, in a Carmelis, you can use it to cover spit or something else that's gross, and so you can use it as a cover, but you can't. So there is a use in a Carmelis, but in a public domain, what are you going to do with the clay? You can't just leave it around there. So there's no use, and therefore it's muktzah. V'Rava Amar, however, Rava says afilu b'reshus harabim. No, you can even move it in reshus harabim. V'az the Rava l'taime, and Rava follows his opinion elsewhere. The Rava Amar havakazav b'ritka the mechuzah. He was walking through the type of one of the marketplaces, one of the public spaces of mechuzah. Istavase misane tina. So his shoes got muddy. Asa shame. So his helper came and started scraping his shoe off with a shard of clay. So one of the Rabbanim tried to stop him. So Rava said, not enough that you didn't learn halacha properly yourself. Are you also trying to teach my students, my people, your mistakes? If this piece of clay was in the courtyard, would it not be able to be used as a cover to a vessel? So since in the courtyard it's a vessel, so wherever it is it's a vessel because it has usage somewhere else. Therefore, to me too, over here it's a usable vessel, and as a usable vessel, we're allowed to use it for other things as well. The seal of a barrel. Their barrels were sealed with a type of clay, so that seal that broke off, and so now you have the seal and some rigid and some edges of the broken barrel. The barrels were made out of clay, and it had a seal. That seal was intact, but some of the clay barrel broke off with it. So you're allowed to move it on Shabbos because you can use that as a cover to another vessel. It is permissible, and with its sharp edges. You're allowed to move it on Shabbos. However, but don't break off another piece in order to smooth out the edges. You're going to break off one of the sharp edges and say, no, but I'm using that to cover another vessel. You can't do that. You're going to say, no, I'm breaking this piece off to use it to support a wobbly table, chair, bed, whatever it may be. You're not allowed to break it off for that because you're making it a nice, smooth, finished vessel, finished cover by taking off the jagged edges. But once it's been thrown to the trash, you've indicated you no longer want it as a vessel, you no longer want it as a cover to another barrel, and therefore it's prohibited. So Rav Papa says, well, I don't know what you're talking about. You just define this as a usable good vessel because it can be used, it is a good seal that can be used for another barrel. The fact that you threw it in the trash doesn't change that. Now, when did he throw it in the trash? He threw it in the trash on Shabbos. So if he threw it prior to Shabbos, of course, the Gemara is going to tell us in a moment, that does count as indicating it's not a vessel. But since at the onset of Shabbos, it was a good vessel. And it's still, when it breaks off, it also is still a good vessel. The fact that you toss it in the trash does not make it as a muktzah item because at the onset of Shabbos, and right now, practically, it's a usable item. So he says it's like throwing your coat into the trash. That doesn't make it non-usable. It doesn't make it muksa. It's still a good coat. Ella Amar Papa, so rather Papa says, and we're in Kuf Chaf Hey Amar Aleph. Im Zarkam about Yom La Ashba. If prior to Shabbos he tossed it in the trash, Asura, then it's going to be prohibited because it's not the same as a coat. A coat is still a usable item. Your broken seal of a barrel, even though that it could be used, but if prior to Shabbos you indicate you're never going to use it and you tossed it, then that makes it a non-item at the onset of Shabbos and muksa. Amar Rav Amduri Amar Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel Bar Amduri said, if your mat fell apart, and these were reed mats that people have, and it fell apart, and so now you have individual pieces of reed, the shoots that are not conjoined and woven into a mat. So you have the loose reeds that came apart. You're allowed to move them on Shabbos. Why isn't what defined by the owner's intent?
Whether it's trash.
It is, but it's defined by the owner's intent at the onset of Shabbos. Muktzah is defined by the onset of Shabbos. If at the onset of Shabbos something is movable, then even though you don't want to use it anymore, but it's a vessel, it is a vessel, so then it's permissible to move.
Right. I remember we talked a lot about the fact that we don't change states during Shabbos. So
correct. So at the onset of Shabbos, but if you tossed it prior to Shabbos, you tossed it in the trash. So and it's a broken vessel. So even though that technically you can still use it, but you've indicated that you're not going to do it. To us, I'll give you an example. To us, you have the cap of a bottle, right? Generally, we toss those. You may want to save it because you lost the cap of another bottle, or you tend to lose the caps of another bottle, so you're going to save one so that you have it. But technically speaking, it's trash. So if you tossed it before Shabbos, it's going to be trash. On Shabbos, if you have it on the table, it's not trash, even though that you don't intend to use it for anything. But it's still a usable cover. It's still a usable lid to a bottle. And at the onset of Shabbos, it was a lid. So therefore, it's not muktzah on Shabbos. Once you toss it in the trash prior to Shabbos, then you've indicated that even though, technically speaking, it has a usage, but you've already thrown it in the trash, showing that it is trash.
Yeah, but
if I say it's trash for me, but somebody else needs it,
if that person took it before Shabbos, that would be fine. But at the onset of Shabbos, it was in my trash. It's trash. Okay. Whereas a coat is not trash. There's nothing wrong with it. So if somebody sees it on Shabbos, he can take it out.
One person's trash, another person's treasure. So if assuming garbage can is not an ashpa necessarily. And if I walk in Shabbos and I see something, I could use it on Shabbos, so you're saying that someone else threw it out. It's not mine, wasn't mine, never been mine. But I find it's there and it's a mitzvah on Shabbos. So that would be muktzah or that would be mutter.
So that's what I'm saying. If it's actually a full intact item, like my coat, it would not be muktzah. That's the Gemara's point of throwing a coat in the garbage. If it's an intact coat, so the fact that I don't need it anymore, and it doesn't make it a non-item. It's an item. But if we have a broken item, meaning it's really it's really trash, but it's usable. It has it's functional. So that's our case. Our case is where the barrel broke and the megufa broke off. But it has a function. I could technically use it for something. If I choose to, then it's a non-muktzah item. If I choose to toss it, then it's trash. The fact that you also are missing a lid to your bottle, so what? But at this point, it's already trash from the onset of Shabbos.
So once it's trash for me, it's trash for everybody.
Only if it's a broken vessel. Correct.
If it's broken.
Yeah.
So even though someone else says, "Oh, I've been looking,"
right, but at the onset of Shabbos, it was muktzah. Correct.
Uh-huh.
So this broken mat, where you have these loose reeds at this point. So what's the halacha? And so he said, you're allowed to move it. My timer. What's the reason why you're allowed to move it? Amar Rava Bar Hamduri Asberli. So Rava said that this fellow himself, Bar Hamduri, who quoted Shmuel, explained it to me. What are you going to use the mat for? You put it down on the ground to cover the ground. Well, so too the individual reeds also can be covered the ground. It will not cover enough of the ground to sit on, but it'll cover some dirt that's on the ground, spit that's on the ground, anything that's disgusting that you want to cover on the ground, you throw some reeds down. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rab Shiori, Pruzmias, also Talta B'Shabbos. Left a worn out talus that disintegrates, you're not allowed to move it on Shabbos if it left over. Abaye says, we'll talk about that. It doesn't have 3 inches, actually, I'm not sure if this is tefachim or fingers. It's not 3 finger breadths. Why? It's so small that it can't even be used by the poor for a patch, and it can't be used for a handkerchief either because it's leftover of a talus. That's the way the Ravid says that you wouldn't use the leftover a small loose piece of talus. You wouldn't use that for your for a handkerchief. Amar Rabbi Zeir. Because it can't be used for poor or rich people, so it has no use, and therefore it's muktzah. Taner Rabbanan. So the Brisa taught Shivrei Taner Yoshan Harei Ein Kekol HaKelim and Tolam B'Chatzim. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Shards of a broken oven. Now their ovens are really, if you think about it, just like an oversized Dutch oven. It's really a large pot, which you would either put the kindling on the inside or kindling on the outside, and you would bake things on the wall of this clay large pot. Sometimes it was cone-shaped upside down. It was cone-shaped so that the fire was trapped in it and the heat was trapped in it. But usually it was just an upright, regular pot. And if it breaks, so this old oven, so it's a hardened clay already. So it's like any vessel, and you're allowed to move it in a courtyard. Different Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you may not use these ovens. You may not move it because it is it's muktzah. Hey, Rabbi Yosef, Meshur Rabbi Lezba Yaakov al Shivrei Tana Yoshin Shenatol b'Shabbos. The Rabbi Yossi testified that Rabbi Lezba Yaakov was of the opinion you could move these broken pieces of tanner, of this large Dutch oven. Okay, so a large clay oven. And the cover also doesn't need a handle. It's a good cover even without a handle. So now the Gemara is going to analyze this. But what's the basis of this machlokas? The first opinion says the broken shards of this oven may not be moved, and the other opinion says that you may move it. This is the basis of the previous machlokas in our Mishnah. Does a shard have to do the same use as the original item or not? And Rabbi Yehuda follows his opinion. And when in our Mishnah he says that it has to do the same, a similar type of work to the original malacha, and Rabbi Meir says that it does not have to as long as it has some sort of use. Maskefla Rava, so Rava says so if the old question is just is it usable as the original or not? So then this is just a question of whether or not shards of clay are allowed to be moved on account of that. They can act as a cover to a vessel or not. And so that's any vessel. Why particularly are you choosing ovens? So rather, the machlokas is about a particular type of oven. This oven was used by heating it from the outside underneath, and it was done in a ditch in the ground. They would make a hole in the ground, the size, approximate size of the pot of this Dutch oven. So it's a deep pot, clay, and then they would make breads by slapping it on the sides of the walls after it's been heated in this hole in the ground. So they would they would stick the pot into the ground. But in order to keep it up off the bottom of the ground, they would put some pebbles, some stones in to jam it in, and this way it wouldn't go all the way down and extinguish the fire. There needed to be enough space for a fire beneath the pot and some air to get out. And so they would put some stones in there. So the Tanan, Nasna al pi abora al pi adus. You take this pot, this clay pot, which they call an oven, and you put it on top of the hole in the ground, whether it's a pit or it's a cistern, which is a built-up pit. Manasak sham evan, and you put a stone to hold the pot in place. So Rabbi Yehuda Eimer in Masik Milamata, Rabbi Yehuda says, as long as the heating element is beneath it, whether it is completely beneath or also on the sides, whether it's an upside down cone shape, either way, as long as the heat comes up at top, tameh, it's going to be tameh because then it's attached to the ground. And Rabbi Yehuda holds in order for an earthenware vessel to be susceptible, oven, to be susceptible to tumah, it has to be attached to the ground. But if it's not in that manner, where it's too wide and just a stone will not lodge it in place, so then it's not considered attached to the ground and it will not be susceptible to tumah. And the Chachamim say no, since it becomes hot, regardless, it is susceptible to tumah. It's tumah. What's the basis of the machlokas? It's on the basis of this pasuk. The Torah says that if the nevela of a sheretz comes onto an earthenware vessel, if it's an oven, yutats, it has to be destroyed. But there's a different word for breaking clay in Hebrew between breaking a earthenware vessel and between breaking something attached to the ground. The word hatatza is when you break something that's attached to the ground. And since the Torah says yutats, it must be that this oven is actually attached to the ground. So Tana v'karayim yutats, tameim yulachem. This oven shall be destroyed, yutats, and it is tummy to you, and it shall remain tummy. So Rabbi Yehuda says, mechusa netitza tummy, only if it's attached to the ground, where you can use the word yutats. That's where it's tummy. But she'ein mechusa netitza, but if it's not attached to the ground, therefore it's going to be tahor. V'Rabbanan savri, and the Rabbanan of the opinion, tameim yiyu lachem, the Torah says that it shall be tummy to you. Mikol makom, regardless whether you attach it to the ground or not. V'Rabbanan nami aksiv yutats, but what did the Rabbanan do with the fact that it says yutats, which indicates that it's attached to the ground? Ahula idach kisa. That's quite the contrary. Not to tell you only something attached to the ground is tamei, but rather to tell you even if it's attached to the ground, it's tamei. Because I may have thought since he attached it to the ground, it's like the ground, and we know that anything attached to the ground is not susceptible to tumah. Ovens that are attached to the ground are susceptible to tumah. Kamash malan v'idach. And the first opinion, what's he going to say? Why does the Torah say that it's tamei and it shall be tamei to you? Haksiv tameim yilachem. Hahikad Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel. Damar Rabbi Yehuda Mashmuel machlekes behesek rishon. That's only on the first initial heating up of this oven, which hardens the clay. Ava behesek sheni. But once it's already been hardened, now it's already a vessel, and that vessel will be susceptible to tumah, even if it's hanging on the around the neck of a camel. meaning not only it's not attached to the ground, but it's not even on the ground, it's in the air, it'll still be a vessel that's tummy. Amar Ula, v'hesek rishon l'Rabbanan afilu tol b'tzavar gamel. And similarly, the first heating up, according to the opinion of the Rabbanan, is also going to be considered a good enough vessel to be tummy, even if it is in the air proper.